Alright, well, first and foremost, I want to thank the defending champ for making this video defending the agnostic label, which really I thought was really honest of him to admit his tendencies towards believing in a theistic possibility of some sort, even if he can't consequently explain what it is. I think that is probably a pretty fair assessment of a middle ground where you can't really consider yourself an atheist, but you can't really consider yourself a theist either. I admit that there is somewhat of a gray area there, but this is where I kind of want to get into my whole point on the discussion. First and foremost, I noticed that you did refer to me as an atheist in our last discussion. I too, I don't really like to be called an atheist. Maybe for different reasons than you, but mine, I think, as I've said before, is based on the fact that I think the term atheism is a pretty big red herring. Like, I don't think it's fair to label anybody based on what they don't believe. Secondly, you said you didn't believe in a God that is angry or jealous or sets up events or whatever. And somebody actually suggested this. You might want to read into deism a little bit, because that might actually fit in with your view, maybe give you a better, clear perception, whatever. It's all about discovering yourself anyway, so you can do that on your own time if you want. But I think that might actually be a fair assessment of what you may have a tendency to believe. It might not even be a theistic God, it might be a deistic God. Another point you made, you said you're not ruling out any God. Well, shit, I mean, there's a lot of gods not to rule out. That's like saying you're not ruling out Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny. Like, there are just so many that you can't disprove that you'd have to acknowledge as a possibility. That I think it's somewhat silly, but I mean, if that's what keeping an open mind is, I don't know. I kind of have a different view on that. There is one quote specifically, and this is where I'm going to set up this whole video. You said something in a comment box underneath your video. I think it would be impossible for us to really understand the nature of God if there is a God. Now, this is where my agnosticism comes in. Agnosticism with an I. I notice when I talk with you, a lot of the agnostics actually, you're trying to set up a scenario that you don't even really understand and acknowledge as a possibility. Montreal Psycho wouldn't stop doing this. There's another guy who actually said he was certain that a God exists, and he was trying to discover its nature, even though he called himself an agnostic. I don't know, whatever. The point is that you guys, I don't mean to generalize, because I mean to talk to you, I don't mean to generalize, but basically you're trying to assess something that doesn't even have a definition. You're trying to assess a possible supernatural being or event, but you don't really know what it is, and you openly admit that there's no way we can really measure it. I'd say based on that, right there is enough for me to go, well, I don't even care. If you can't even give a definition for what I'm supposed to acknowledge or not acknowledge or believe in or not believe in, then I think the question of its existence is meaningless. It's like me asking you, do you think a frake exists? But I'm not going to tell you what it is, because it's a supernatural something or event. But do you believe it could be a possibility? It's kind of silly. It's kind of silly to even think about it when there's no consistent definition. So that's why I take the position of theistic non-cognitivism in a question about, like, quote-unquote God. Because if there is no definition, if there is no set of properties or something you can point to and give as an example, or anything at all, like nothing that you can actually give a consistent personification of what it actually is, then it's a meaningless question, and it doesn't even need to be discussed. I think it's just something that I wouldn't even bother turning and tossing in my head. I mean, you said it yourself, your beliefs are vague and hard to understand, or you don't even really understand them. And I think that's why. I think it's because you're toiling over a definition that doesn't exist. And that's why I think the question of God is meaningless, unless you can actually give a consistent definition as to what God is.